Sometimes former presidents do go to jail. Nicolas Sarkozy starting his 5-year sentence over the illicit financing of his 2007 campaign by Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. Proof that justice is truly blind, or as his supporters contend, revenge by magistrates often maligned by the 7-year-old conservative when he was in power. France is split. Emmanuel Macron welcomed Sarkozy to the presidential palace last week ahead of his incarceration. Macron's justice minister says he'll go visit the former leader at Paris's La Santé prison. So does jailing a former head of state really erode faith in institutions? Institutions already put to the test with the current showdown between a lame duck president and a splintered parliament. Or should it be about the facts of the case, the dealings with Gaddafi and his head of intelligence, Abdallah Senussi, seen as the mastermind of the 1988 Lockerbie bombings and the 1989 downing of a French passenger plane over Niger? Of course, that all depends what echo chamber you live in. Today in the France 24 debate, is jail time justified for Nicolas Sarkozy? With us from Maison Lafitte, the mayor of that Paris suburb, Jacques Millard, former member of parliament from Nicolas Sarkozy's Les Républicains party. Good to see you.
Yes, nice to see you again, François.
He covered courts in a previous life for the Reuters news agency, journalist Thierry Lévesque, author of books that include Untouchable on the cases surrounding Sarkozy's predecessor, Jacques Chirac, who was convicted but did not go to jail. Maybe we'll talk a bit about, compare the two a little bit later. Criminal defense and human rights attorney Camille Gosson. Good to see you. And for a deep dive, by the way, into the specifics of the Sarkozy trial itself, you can find last month's France 24 debate devoted to the verdict. Panelists included our own Claire Pacalin, who covered the case for us. Claire, you've been outside the prison where Sarkozy was brought this Tuesday. Good to see you.
Good to see you, François.
Claire Pacalin outside the prison. Nicolas Sarkozy's supporters, well, they turned up before dawn to cheer on the former president. Charlotte Lamb has more.
France's former president Nicolas Sarkozy leaves his home in Western Paris. His wife beside him as family, staffers and supporters sing the national anthem. The start of a journey they never imagined for the former head of state.
Nicolas Sarkozy poses no danger if he's free, so it's just ridiculous. It's a mockery of justice, meaningless, like so much of what's happening in France at the moment.
Police have escorted France's former right-wing leader to one of the country's most notorious prisons. Last month, he was sentenced to 5 years for criminal conspiracy, convicted of overseeing a plot to take tens of millions of euros from Libya to fund his 2007 election campaign. He then went on to hold France's highest office until 2012. Sarkozy has always maintained his innocence, calling the September verdict and the judge's decision to jail him pending appeal a miscarriage of justice. Shortly after leaving his home, he took to social media.
As I'm about to cross the walls of La Santé prison, my thoughts go to the French people. I want to tell them with the unwavering strength that is mine that the former president of the Republic who was locked up this morning is an innocent man.
But one national survey showed 6 out of 10 people in France believe the prison sentence to be fair. And the head of the French Magistrates Union says it's not politically motivated. Outside La Santé prison, those who believe justice has been served.
Justice is the same for everyone. There's no reason for special treatment. There's no double standards.
Sarkozy is expected to be kept in solitary confinement. This is his second conviction, but today marks a first, the start of a prison term for a former French president.
So, Claire Pacalin, there's two issues. There's whether or not, as Nicolas Sarkozy claims, he's an innocent man, and there's the issue of whether he should be behind bars while he's appealing.
Well, all comes down to that verdict, which we, I'm sure, witnessed together in court a few weeks ago. And this led to a gasp in the courtroom when the judge read out the reading, which was that this would be a prison sentence which would be into effect even though before any appeal could be launched. execution provisoire. So that really is something that Nicolas Sarkozy and his supporters think is extremely unfair.
Prosecution did not ask for it.
No, the prosecution did not ask for it, which is why it was a surprise for many in the courtroom. But for the judge, the facts, the gravity of the facts in this case justified that Nicolas Sarkozy, the former French president, be put behind bars, even though an appeal has been launched. We expect it to be at some point next year. The 5-year prison sentence, though, I think we can all be clear that we don't expect Nicolas Sarkozy to spend 5 years behind bars. Already this morning, as soon as he entered the prison, his lawyers put in a request for immediate release under certain conditions, so perhaps wearing electronic tag, house arrest. And we expect judges to rule in the next month or so as to whether he could be released under certain conditions. He's 70 years old as well. That could weigh in his favour. And what judges will be looking at, those will be looking at this request for him to be released under those conditions. They will be looking at, is he a flight risk? Probably not. But also, is going to prison, detaining him, the only way of ensuring that witnesses won't be pressured or any evidence might not be tampered with? So that's what judges will be looking at. But certainly tonight, Nicolas Sarkozy is behind bars. And
there were 3 co-defendants, Camille Gosson, who were also sentenced in this case. 378-page verdict that came out of last month's trial. Is it justified that he's spending a night in jail?
Legally speaking, as you said, the judgment is almost 400 pages, and they've motivated their verdict and also their sentence. And the sentencing of Nicolas Sarkozy is 2 pages long, and the judges certainly wrote explicitly why they considered that he should be sentenced to first 5 years in prison, and that his sentence should be executed now. Now, whether it's justified, morally speaking, there are many legal debates.
What's their argument?
The argument, well, it's sparking a debate around prison in general, and just the fact that should people who are convicted for offenses against goods and not against people should be put in jail. And there are several lawyers and several judges in France who feel like people who are convicted for offenses against goods should not be in prison, because prison should be reserved for the ones who still present a danger to other people, which is not necessarily the case in offenses against goods. So that's the first argument. And then there's the case of Nicolas Sarkozy is sparking another debate around executional provision, as you mentioned, and whether prison should be ordered while an appeal is pending. I just want to note that Nicolas Sarkozy being sentenced with executional provision is not an exception. Right now in France, for offenses who are more than 2 years, when someone is convicted to more than 2 years, in 90% of cases, there is executional provision. So Nicolas Sarkozy is not an exception. And it's actually something that criminal defense lawyers have been denouncing for several years now. And I feel like as a lawyer, it's good that the debate is getting more attention now, even though it's because we have a former president who's subject to it now.
So Jacques Millard, the problem is this law, which is unduly harsh during an appeal process. It's perhaps not the fact that it's this one man who's being singled out, or is he being singled out?
Well, you have to recount the history between Sarkozy and the judges, because this is a long history. He treated the judge, there are P's, small P's, and I have the feeling, I tell you frankly, that today we have a settling of score. The judge say we have him and we are going to send him to jail. In fact, when you read the judgment, there is no evidence of criminal association. This is pure that the judge has the feeling that he should have known, but there is no evidence. And I think this is a shock. And I think that in fact, today, the judge have played, really God. And this is something that will have consequences. The present attitude of the French toward justice is very bad. They have the feeling that the judges, some judges, not all, they are politicians, they are militants, And in fact, you have the
Is that your feeling?
wall of dirt. Pardon?
Is that how you feel? Do you feel judges are
Well,
partial?
look, no. I don't say whole, but you have, when you have, the union of the magistrate who appealed for, a candidate at the, and they break and they take a political position. This is awful for the confidence that you should have in justice. I think, in my opinion, there is something we should do with the politicians, is to restore confidence of the French in their justice. But to do that, it means that the judge, they have to be very reserved. They should not play God. They should not play a political role. And this is what happened, because there is, in the case of Sarkozy, there is no evidence of the criminal association.
All right, so your problem, Jacques Millard, is with the guilty verdict itself. It's not with the fact that there was this sentence during the appeal process.
No, I think that in this judgment, that he's been sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. Okay, but there is no need to send him to jail because he is no public disturbance. He will not make a second offense. This is rubbish. When I hear that, of course, this law appeals and is an application for many people who breach the law. But in the case of Sarkozy, there is no danger that it will be a public disturbance. This is why I say this is something more. It looks like, as I said, a settling of scores between the judges and the politicians taken in the whole.
Thierry Lévesque, do you agree?
Absolutely not, of course, because if you have attended the trial, as I did, and not Mr. Millard, you can see that there are proofs of the criminal conspiracy, the personal diary of a Libyan minister who asserts illegal financing of Sarkozy, the financial tracks of Libyan money paid for this agreement between Sarkozy team and the Libyan regime, and many other things. So this is the gravity of this exceptional gravity, says the court, which has justified the sentence and also the immediate prison for former president. He was submitted to the rule of law. The rule of law in France, if you are sentenced to more than 3-4 years in prison, in your first trial, you go to jail. It's not for Mr. Sarkozy, it's for ordinary people every day. Tens of people every day in Paris, in all the French cities, are submitted to this rule of law. So that was perhaps what was historical in this case. It is the worst corruption case of the Fifth Republic.
Worst corruption case?
Yes, because with a foreign state and a foreign dictatorship asking for money for arranging the case of Mr. Senoussi, you mentioned, who organized a terrorist attack against a French plane in which 170 persons were killed. So discussing an arrangement with these people, the Sarkozy team went to Libya. He was acknowledged, he was admitted during the court. They went to Libya discussing with Senoussi, and they obtained money whose tracks were found in the investigation. So the gravity of the case has justified the sentence and has justified the common law applied to the president, which is a first, of course, but after all, the rule of law applies to every citizen, including the president.
I want to get back to the specifics of the case later. But first, this question that you talk about there, is justice blind? Does it apply to everyone? On Monday, France's Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, he, who, by the way, originally hails from Sarkozy's Les Républicains party, said he would visit him in jail as justice minister, while at the same time, the president, on a trip to Slovenia, defended the fact that last week Emmanuel Macron welcomed Sarkozy to the Élysée Palace.
Regarding Nicolas Sarkozy, I've made public statements always very clear about the independence of the judiciary, which was my role. It was normal on a human level for me to receive one of my predecessors in this context.
Now, in response, the magistrates union that Jacques Millard referenced, putting out a statement to remind the president and his justice minister that the law must be the same for all 83,516 detainees in France's overcrowded prisons. The magistrates union statement reminds all detainees deserve the attention of the justice minister and the president of the republic. Their empathy cannot be selective. Your reaction to that, Camille Gosson, to that statement by the magistrates union?
The debate is getting polarized between representatives of the executive and representatives of the judiciary. And it sparks from a very important principle that's enshrined in our constitution and that French people are very attached to, which is the separation of powers. And this principle has been thrown out in many, many ways, especially during the case of Nicolas Sarkozy, people saying that the judiciary should not interfere within the executive and within what Nicolas Sarkozy did as a president and during his campaign. But actually, and I feel like this is very important to remind, is that the principle of separation of powers does not mean that there's never, ever a dialogue between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. And especially, it does not mean that the executive and the representatives of the state cannot be held accountable under the law of France.
Was Emmanuel Macron right to welcome Sarkozy for lunch last week, or was that a bad idea?
Legally speaking, he can. But when a representative of the state invites someone who is being charged with criminal offenses and who's now been convicted with criminal offenses, it's difficult to then argue that a clear separation of powers should be done when it can be interpreted as an interference of the executive within the judiciary and the judicial, and there was a court decision. So it's as the judge, the Union of Magistrates interpreted it, it was an attack against that decision, and whether their sentiment is right or not, it's definitely something to then take into account when you want to criticize the judicial power.
Jacques Millard, do you fear perhaps that Emmanuel Macron showing support, even though he says it's only because it's a current
I tell
to
you,
a previous,
I'm not,
do you fear this may backfire? Do you think this might backfire? That the appeals courts might decide?
No. He was right to do it. He did it, on a pressure, let's say, kind of affection that he has for Sarkozy, because that's a long story. I would like to say something. There is no separation of power, because justice is an authority and not a power. That you should correct yourself, young lady. Never fail, because in fact, the question of when I heard that the attack on the plane, I know perfectly the case. And I can tell you that you cannot bring this case into this, what happened with the judgment who sent Sarkozy to jail. That has nothing to do. I do remember that I had to defend the fact that the French would like to be treated like the British in this, in the solution of this attempt. So I please keep cool, because I think you are making everything, amalgamating things like that, and this is not acceptable.
It was, just to remind our viewers, it was when Nicolas Sarkozy was Jacques Chirac's interior minister back in 2005 that he went to Libya, visited Muammar Gaddafi. The moment was key there. You see them in the tent there. Was key in the secret financing of his winning run for president 2 years later. Gaddafi's brother-in-law and head of intelligence, Abdallah Senussi, who's also been linked to the West Berlin discotheque bombing of 1986, the Lockerbie bombing of 1988, and the case we're talking about, the 1989 downing of a French UTA airliner over Niger. He would be the one overseeing the money transfers with key Sarkozy aides. also convicted Claire Paquelin in that trial last month.
Certainly. And I'd just like to go back to Jacques Mignard's point about the petit pois, this idea that magistrates in France have this kind of feeling of revenge towards the former French President Sarkozy, because several years ago he referred to them as petit pois or little garden peas.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to magistrates a lot as part of my job, and not only those who are involved in trade unions, and they're just not that petty. They don't care about the petit pois accusations several years ago. They have a huge workload. They have so many dossiers to get through. They have other business going on. We've got to remember that is part of Nicolas Sarkozy's communication strategy. It's, they are all out to get me. I am the victim in all of this. The idea that really all magistrates in France and the judges care that once upon a time we called them petit pois, no, I just don't think that's realistic.
Thierry Lévesque, again,
I hope so.
we're talking about a case where they're dealing with a man who has blood on his hands, Abdallah Senussi. And of course, we know that Sarkozy was the first to champion
victims
bombing Libya.
It was said to him during the trial.
How does
by the way,
how does that compare with the conviction of Jacques Chirac? Jacques Chirac never went to jail, but he was a former president convicted in a kickback scandal involving public housing.
Sarkozy is a child of the Chirac system, first of all. He has been brought up, he has been a fan, he has begun his politics with supporting Chirac. But the Chirac case was very different. It was a corruption system within France, you know, with public markets exchanged with bribes, classical corruption, I would say, which is already serious, of course. But he was at the end of his life, and he was sentenced for a suspended jail term. But he was the first also in history, he was the first Republican president sentenced by justice. So it has marked, we can see it from now, it has marked a landmark in the treatment of judicial scandals towards politics.
How does that case compare to this one?
I don't think it is comparable because, again, it was a very ordinary corruption. The Libyan corruption scandal is much bigger. It involves the diplomacy of France. It involves the victims of the flight UTA, Mr. Miard, because the victims were civil plaintiffs in the corruption trial of Mr. Sarkozy, and they were admitted as victims of the corruption in these judgments. So I think, to my opinion, it's the worst corruption scandal of the Fifth Republic because of this level, you know, the president, the future president at this time, and a dictatorship, Gaddafi and Libya,
May I recall
which has
you
given money, and it is proved in the
Jacques Mignard.
in the inquiry.
Yeah, may I recall you that, in fact, in this judgment, Sarkozy has been discharged of corruption and concealment, so, and misuse of public funds. So you cannot, you know, amalgamate everything. I'm sorry to say, read the judgment again. This is very clear. This is only the criminal association in which they say he should have known.
With the goal of corruption. Criminal association with the goal of corruption. Which is the same.
With criminal intent.
Yes, but there is no evidence. This is
Not
only
only
the
intent.
pure intimacy of the judge.
Your thoughts on the facts of the case, Camille Gosson, and whether the French are discussing the facts of the case enough. I don't know if you watch the 24-hour news channels or read the newspapers. Are the facts of the case being brought up on the day that Nicolas Sarkozy is spending his first night in jail?
Not really, except for Mr. Lévesque today, who's been trying to recall about the facts. The main debate has been around whether trying to distance Nicolas Sarkozy from the corruption, because as Mr. Mignard said, he's been acquitted of this charge for now. But other than that, it's been concentrating today on the provisional execution, which in a sense is related to the facts, because in the judgment, the ordering of the provisional execution is motivated by the exceptional gravity of the facts. But then there's not that many details in the debate right now about what makes those facts that grave. And I feel like it's partly because of the law, actually, because the law is pretty vague on the executional provision, there's not strict, no precise criteria compared to, for example, provisional detention in France, where you have 7 criteria and the judge just has to check on the checklist whether there's any of those criteria that's met. And then if so, the person is going to jail for provisional detention. For a warrant of detention with deferred effect and provisional enforcement, it's based on, the test is that there needs to be elements of the case that justify this specific measure. But other than that, there's nothing. So the judges, they are very free to look what element of the case they feel like is important, and then they can write in the judgment. And in the judgment for Mr. Sarkozy, they wrote that it was due to the exceptional gravity of the facts. But that's also an issue because even though he's been convicted, he's appealing his conviction. And so he's under the law, he's still presumed innocent. Presumed innocent does not mean that he's innocent. It means that he is involved in a criminal case and that he still has rights, but that he's still being charged with what he is being charged.
Let me ask about rights, Claire Pacalin, because if you're a Nicolas Sarkozy fan, you think it's scandalous that he's sleeping in a 9-square-meter cell at the Santé prison. If you're a detractor of Nicolas Sarkozy, you're saying he's getting special treatment. He doesn't have to share those 9 square meters with another inmate.
Well, certainly the French prison service has been very clear that there's no special treatment for Nicolas Sarkozy. But that said, for his own protection, that's what the prison services say, he is being isolated from other prisoners, so at La Santé prison. So his cell is at the end of a corridor, the end of a wing, and on the one side where there's an adjoining cell, there's no one in it. So he'll have no neighbours, he'll have no contact with any other inmates. If he wants to go to the library or the gym to work out, no contact at all. He'll be sleeping on linen provided for him by the prison. He will be able to pay a bit more money and choose to have certain different types of food. He can't bring in food from outside the prison, but he can choose to make some food in his cell because he have a little area, a little hob. He has his own loo, his own toilet. He'll be able to wear his own clothes, but not navy blue because that's the colour that the prison guards wear. He can't wear a hood. No one in the prison is allowed to wear hoods. So he's no ordinary prisoner, but the prison service has been very clear they're not going to treat him in any special way, but for his own protection, not as a punishment, for his own protection, he is being isolated. It's worth noting the state of French prisons is pretty terrible across the country. And actually, La Santé is in pretty good nick compared to other prisons. And there's a great France in Focus report out at the moment by Natasha Vesnich and John Walsh about the state of prisons in France. Even at La Santé, which was renovated not too long ago, there are over 80 inmates sleeping on mattresses on the floor because there aren't enough beds because it's so overcrowded. So certainly another thing to look into here is the state of French prisons.
If you were to put a hierarchy into what has been the big talking point in this country over the last 48 hours in the build-up to Nicolas Sarkozy making that trip across town to the La Santé prison, what has it been? Has it been about his sentence, the fact that a president of the Republic is behind bars, the facts of the case, or the penal system in France?
It's a difficult question, Francois, because there were lots of points coming up. I think there's another one that we could potentially add is I think some French people are concerned about the image of France on the international stage, that this doesn't look good for France. And I think that's something a lot of French people take very seriously. They don't want to look bad. It's a bit embarrassing on that level. Certainly, Sarkozy's team have made a big point of him being a much-loved father, husband. You know, we saw this gathering outside his residence, which was organised by his children. One interesting anecdote, though, that was someone brought a loudspeaker and was playing music, including French rapper La Fouine du Ferme, which is a song about prison. And so there was this moment of a whole lot of supporters, but this music going on in the background and everyone thinking, is that a provocation? What's going on? But I would recommend anyone who's interested in French rap. It's a very interesting song. You can YouTube it. It's an interesting song. But there they are, the Sarkozy clan. There are many points to look at here, but I think one of them that's key is this question we've been looking at. Should he be in prison now, even though he's appealing? We expect that appeals trial to take place next year. Of course, innocent until proven guilty, presumption of innocence in this case, but the judge said it, the facts, the gravity of the facts justified this detention immediately.
Does this in any way alter the image of France on the world stage, Thierry Lévesque?
But I've heard this even among French citizens. This is supposed to degrade the image of France. You can take it on the contrary. The democracy works as a judicial independent system can sentence a former president. So, after all, it would be more, to my eyes, a proof of good health of the country, of a good work of the institutions.
System, rather than some kind of a cover-up because he's a former French president, so we can't possibly convict him. Yeah.
Jacques Miat, we've got a lot of viewers in the United States. I guess a lot of them will be projecting their own thoughts on a head of state who has criminal cases before him or had them. Do you agree with Thierry Lévesque on this point?
No, I can't agree, because in fact, when you read carefully the judgment, you see that the only things which sent Sarkozy as immediate execution was the criminal association, which is not proved. And he has been discharged of corruption. He has been discharged of concealment, embezzlement of public funds. So you can see that even the judge, you know, they have seized so-called that he should have known that Hortefeux and Guérard, they went there, and this is a kind of criminal association. Let me say, this is a bit weak. This is something very, very light. There is no argument, real argument, to send him to jail as immediate, but they wanted to get him.
Among those defending Nicolas Sarkozy, someone who's not from his party, the front runner for France's 2027 presidential race, the far-right's Marine Le Pen. She, by the way, currently appealing a corruption conviction that would bar her from running for public office. A big national survey conducted in the past month by the Jaurès Foundation think tank for Le Monde newspaper and others points to a general climate of distrust in politics in France. It's always been the case, but it seems to be getting worse, with traditional conservatives more and more turning to the far right. Among the questions asked, trust in institutions, here's a few of them. The office of the presidency, 22%. Parliament, 20%. Media, 34%. And the justice system, 44%, so doing a little bit better. Camille Gosson, do you feel as though faith in the law and faith in the independence of the judiciary is going down? I know it's not scientific what I'm asking you, but what's your feeling?
It depends on who you're asking. If you're asking people who are taken in this huge machine that is the judicial system, people who are charged with criminal offenses and people who are convicted, the trust is pretty low from the ones I encounter on a daily life in my work, because it's a very impressive machine and there are laws that are pretty hard to understand and that the judges can only apply. They do not make the law, they apply them. And actually the passion of Mr. Miat is not unjustified when you are confronted with an offense that is conspirational, that is criminal conspiracy. It's actually a criminal offense that's been criticized by many defense lawyers for many years now, and we're only putting it in the public debate now that it's Mr. Sarkozy who is concerned with it. But it's, as Mr. Lévesque said, tens of people who are in front of judges every day in France, notably for this criminal offense. And it's a very vague offense, and the standard to get convicted for this offense is pretty low, because you don't need to prove that there were criminal facts committed. You need to prove it's a preventive offense. You need to prove that there was a project.
Yeah, because they couldn't find money inside of his accounts.
Yes.
But they did find him guilty of the intent to set up this system whereby they financed his campaign.
The start rather than the intent. They received the money, but it is not proved they have used it in the campaign.
Right.
Yeah,
The Libyan money was paid.
Right.
It is proof. Yeah.
And Thierry Lévesque, your thoughts on this? Was it this erosion of trust in institutions Is it accelerating in France?
It is accelerating, but not in connection with this case. It is accelerating, of course, with the crisis of government, majority in the parliament, and the succession of governments in these last months, of course, and the incapacity of finding a compromise between the right, left, and other forces. So, but I think this case is. Does not degrade more the atmosphere in French politics.
And again, at the center of it, for those who don't know him, is a French president really unlike any other. Nicolas Sarkozy rose to prominence as the 29-year-old mayor of a Paris suburb who took on a hostage taker in a daycare center. He then posed as a man of action after the 2005 riots in the Paris suburbs. The then Interior Minister who would double down on law and order tough talk while running for president in 2007.
Je suis là pour ça, pour vous débarrasser de cette racaille.
I'm here to get rid of this scum, you heard Sarkozy at the time say. Can you say he's one of a kind? Thierry Lévesque, Nicolas Sarkozy?
I wouldn't go to this point, but he's, in a way, a bit victim of his own legislation, because we must stress that the immediate executions of first decisions were decided by politicians under the majority of Mr. Muammar, Mr. Sarkozy. They were in favor of a strong justice, a quick justice. He has always been in favor of this. So, and now that it applies to his own case, he does not agree anymore. So there is a bit of irony in this history, but he lives what he has proposed in a way.
When you look at those archive images that we're showing, Jacques Millard, would you say Nicolas Sarkozy is somebody who's already something of the past, or is he still a player in the present today?
You know, my saying is that in politics, until you are not at the churchyard, you are never finished. You see, because Sarkozy is a strong, a strong man. He will fight. He will go to the end. I tell you one thing. In the figures that you show, that 44% of the judge at the, let's say,
the justice system
of the French, I agree, because I have been judged several times, and I have been judged by absolutely very judge. Sometimes you have what you call the walls of the idiot, the wall of the judge, which is very, is something which is in the spirit of the French.
And on the question of Nicolas Sarkozy himself, could he be at times his own worst enemy?
Who knows? In fact, I tell you one thing, that he will fight. He said it, and I'm pretty sure that he will go on, and at the end, we will see the appeal. We will see how it works. But it is true that, in fact, sometimes he has spoken too much. When you show him that he said, I'm going to get rid of those idiots and so on, those scums, I think it was a mistake, because when you are president, when you are minister, you should be very careful in the words you use.
Claire Pacalin, just again covering that trial, there were all those who were there to support Nicolas Sarkozy. Did you have a feeling he was a relic from the past, or that he's still very much a player?
No, I don't think he's a relic from the past. I would agree with Jacques Millard. He's not wrong. Until you're in the churchyard in politics, you can keep going, and he does still enjoy. It's a strong, hardcore bunch of diehard Sarkozy supporters, but they're there. Some of them are of a certain age, but not all of them, and some of them are of younger generations as well. At the gathering near his residence this morning, before he went into the car and was driven to prison, there weren't thousands of people, 100, 200 by the estimates I got from reporters at France 24 who were there. So, we're not talking about people across France who came and no, but those who support him would definitely see him as being in the present. You only have to look at the fact that he visited Emmanuel Macron at the Élysée Palace last week. So he certainly still has influence.
Thierry Lévesque, what's that about? Is it?
Yes, he remains a powerful character and actually has demonstrated it by meeting the president, having the visit soon of the Minister of Justice, and he still has seats on boards of big companies, including the ones of the press who support him in the after the judgment. So he remains a powerful character, but now he has been sentenced definitely in another case once. Now he's in prison in the second case, and on November 8th, perhaps there will be a third conviction in a separate case. And there are also investigations going on about his links with Qatar, Russia, etc. So I think the judicial future of Mr. Sarkozy is not particularly happy.
And what about his political family, Jacques Millard, to which you belong? There's been a hollowing out of the middle, if you will, in France. We've seen the current constitutional crisis. Are supporters of Nicolas Sarkozy in the past going to migrate elsewhere, either further to the center or further to the far right?
I'll tell you one thing. I have been sometimes in a dispute with Sarkozy, but I wrote to him a personal letter to support him and to say, I am with you. But I tell you one thing. I don't agree with Sarkozy's policy all the time because he made mistakes, rather big one. And in fact, also because he's been with his family a bit awkward, you know. He has been supporting sometimes Renaissance MPs or candidates, and I was shocked, I tell you frankly. So he's a man of character, okay, but sometimes he has betrayed, you know, his own policy, his own family. So that's why I say, let's say, as a person, I would like that he will get on, but as a politician, as a political leader, I have doubts.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Jacques Millard, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Maison Lafitte. I want to thank Camille Gosson, Thierry Lévesque, and France 24's Claire Pacalin. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.